Pleasure to me all at last, and welcome back once again to HJN Season 5. And while we are getting to a point in which that I might want to start a new sub-series, I do want to have some more normal topics to go with first, and topography is what I have next in mind. And I will say that the requests are starting to pile up, but unfortunately I'm going to have to address something real quick. Some of your suggestions are actually ones that were based off of ones that I had already done, or at least ones that were very closely linked to such subjects that I've done. Some people thought I should talk a bit more about mythical creatures, because while I had talked a bit about the dragons, apparently that's not enough. I feel like I could scale a few episodes of HJN into a small marathon worth of subjects where I can talk about such creatures like the unicorn, chupacabra, or leprechaun. Anything of the sorts that's deemed mythical other than the dragon. But here's the thing. There's only so much of that I can do at the moment here, since the requests are already pretty large. And the list is already like 6 whole pages long, and possibly well into the 200s. Which is enough for me to work with for at least 6 months. So let's try and scale back on that, shall we? Anyways, topography refers to studies of land based on features such as the height, width, and other such proportions. Often, topography is more relating to hills, mountainsides, rivers, valleys, craters, and other such geologic equations that currently sits on our own lands. And the lands, of course, can vary in shape and size, vary in elevation based on sea level and the highest height you can reach, or there's also the idea of them having different resources or different weather patterns taking place. Every land is different, every county is different, every state is different, and of course every country is different. Not just in correlation to studies upon lands, but from hundreds of other things. Culture, politics, sports, cuisine, cars. Yeah, and the list could pretty much go on from that point here. But we're mostly talking about the studies of land that correlate to where we live here. In this particular case, I will say, Menominee Falls, for instance, has some hilly terrain in a select few portions. The roads that we drive do usually correlate with the land in which that it settles on, but it also settles on roads having to elevate because of intersections with other things. Other roads, river patterns in which boat traffic occurs, railroad tracks, etc. There's always a time in which that roads will need to get out of the way of other things that are right below them, and so that's why they have high-rises built or bridges. But as we know, topography is more about the natural landscape and not so much as the kind of lands that people create. Of course, we do know that such natural fragmentations have occurred in which land is swept away, such as weathering, erosion, etc. But there's always the case in which that human intervention seemingly is more common. From digging up dirt with a shovel to bringing in a bunch of construction equipment to modify the landscape, or create a foundation for a brand new building, restaurant, home, or whatnot. Topography, as we know, though, again, it doesn't really concern all of that stuff that people are known to do to planet Earth as we speak. But as we know, we are familiar with the fact that topography has still allowed for countless natural landscapes to be discovered and also for various things to be done. There's a lot of tourist attractions that do allow for the natural terrain to be explored by many people, such as Jewel Cave, the Rocky Mountains, Chattanooga, Tennessee. I mean, they're fragments of the Appalachians, of course, as well as Rock City, which is, of course, the bordering of several different states. Yeah, so if that already is not impressive, we could talk a bit about the four corners of the United States. I mean, with Arizona and Utah, just to name a few of those pieces. And then, of course, there also are other such things that do correlate to state lines. There, of course, is the State Line Road that separates Wisconsin and Illinois. A small set of railroad tracks also sits about 20 yards north of the border just as well. It's one of the only ways that you can cross the border into Illinois without having to use the interstate. And while there are many other paths like it in which you can naturally enter another state without having to use the interstate or pay a toll, there's always the sheer likelihood that that's not always the option. The interstates do allow for the fastest and sometimes most efficient methods of traffic to enter another state. Yeah, kind of getting off topic again. That seemingly is what happens a lot when I make videos like this. But overall, topography is a well-known study that's allowed for a lot of discoveries and a lot of possibilities to occur. Not to mention, it's also helped in a lot of different ways, such as helping to prevent mass fatalities during a volcanic eruption. The studies of such mountainous terrains, including volcanic calderas and magma chambers, have allowed for people to identify just when exactly is a volcano going to erupt. And if they can't exactly find out when it's going to happen, they'll give out a really good rough estimate, in which that they'll give people time to evacuate. One such famous case was in Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, in which that scientists were able to determine that Mount Pinatubo was going to erupt at some point, and over 20,000 people were able to evacuate safely right before it erupted. And as destructive as the eruption was, it was quite a life-saving challenge that thankfully paid off extremely well. And while not every other case relating to volcanic eruptions has ended so well, like Mount St. Helens or Mount Vesuvius or even some rather ancient volcanoes from way back in the day, it's still worth knowing that some eruptions, while they do happen, we have at least been able to understand how they work and how they're going to erupt, allowing for any of us to make time necessary to allow for evacuation of any nearby residents. Hopefully, when all this talk about Yellowstone comes to an end with it erupting, somebody will have figured out how to prepare for that. Well, I feel like I've gone pretty far enough with this one, so you can stay tuned for more in this series, and I'll also have many more episodes of HJN coming shortly.